Scotia. I know we've all been watching this on the news. My hearts go out to everyone affected in what is a terrible situation. I want to thank the police for their hard work and people for cooperating with authorities.
I'd like to speak briefly about the situation unfolding right now in Portapique, Nova Scotia. I know we've all been following the news, and I want you to know that our hearts go out to all those affected by this event. I want to thank the authorities for their good work and everyone else for their cooperation. This morning, I also want to wish a happy Orthodox Easter to those celebrating today. Even if you do it on Skype, I hope you can spend this special day with your family and friends.
Happy Orthodox Easter to everyone who's celebrating today. Even if it's just over Skype, I hope you can spend this special day with family and friends. Although this pandemic has affected everyone, some people have been hit especially hard. Right now, too many Canadians are facing some really difficult situations. If you live with a disability, I don't have to tell you what this can look like. You might be worried about whether your support worker will be able to keep coming. You might be concerned about getting groceries or about your finances. And if you're caring for someone with a disability, you're probably anxious about getting support too. Your voice matters. Your experience is important. And our government is listening. If this crisis has laid bare the gaps that still exist for far too many Canadians, it has also given us an opportunity to address them. It has encouraged us to have even more meaningful conversations about how we can make our country a more inclusive and a more equitable place. Last week, Minister Qualtrough launched a COVID-19 Disability Advisory Group as part of our plan to keep all Canadians healthy, informed, and safe. We're addressing key issues like equal access to health care and information, as well as support on jobs and income. And we're doing all of this work with you at the table. On that note, I want to recognize the outstanding organizations right across the country, like the Rick Hansen Foundation, that are bringing these issues to the fore. You are doing incredible work, and we are proud to be your partner.
Last week, Minister Qualtrough launched the Disability Advisory Group. That is part of our plan to help everyone to stay healthy and safe. We are facing an unprecedented situation, and we are now looking at the most important issues, such as equal access to health care and information. We also want to provide financial support to those who need it, and we have put measures in place to protect jobs. This is work we're doing together. I want to thank all the leaders and organizers around the country that are drawing our attention to particular challenges that the most vulnerable Canadians are facing. You are doing an extraordinary job, and we are there to be your full partner.
In response to this pandemic, we've developed a 3-point economic plan to help Canadians get through this tough time. We introduced the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to help people who've lost their wages. We brought in new loans for businesses, and we introduced the wage subsidy. But there is still work to do. There are still people to reach. That's why this past week we expanded the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to include workers making up to $1,000 a month, seasonal workers, and those whose EI has recently run out. It's why we put in place new measures to support people in the energy industry, which is suffering right now. And we also brought in support for people who continue to do incredible work in the arts, culture, and sports communities. And it's why we've kept making progress with the provinces and territories on increasing wages for essential workers who need it. Now, things are tough for employers, too. So we brought in a whole range of additional support on loans and credit, and for Indigenous businesses and businesses in the North. And for communities that need extra support, we approved requests to have the Canadian Armed Forces assist in Quebec long-term care facilities, as well as in Nunavik and in Basse-Côte-Nord. Today, I can announce that we've also approved the extension of a request from the Government of Quebec for the Canadian Rangers to help Nutashquan and Equanichit First Nations near Basse-Côte-Nord. All these measures we've brought in are about helping you do the things that will get us through this. And it's working. We're seeing the numbers trend in the right direction. So we need to keep doing what we're doing and keep being extremely careful. And we will get through this together. Depuis le début de la crise,
from the beginning of the crisis, we have been announcing historic measures with the emergency benefit, the wage subsidy, and the loans to small businesses. We are helping millions of families and workers and entrepreneurs. But there are still people we need to help. So this week, we extended support through the benefit. We put in place new measures for energy sector workers, a sector particularly hard hit by the epidemic. And we also want to help people who are doing an extraordinary job in the arts and culture and sports communities. At the same time, we're working with the provinces and territories to increase the wages of essential workers who need more support. And of course, this is also a difficult period for employers. Therefore, we introduced a whole series of additional measures, including loans and contributions to businesses, including for Indigenous and Northern businesses. And for those communities that need a little bit more help, we have approved requests for the Canadian Armed Forces to be deployed to Quebec in long-term care homes and in Nunavik and the Lower North Shore. Today, I can also announce that the Rangers will be helping other communities in Quebec, the Nutashquan community and the Equanichit community. We introduced all of these different measures to allow you to follow the recommendations of our healthcare experts and help us to fight this virus. And it's working. The numbers show that we're moving in the right direction. So we must continue to stay home and be cautious. And together, we will get through this. Having said that, even if we are pointing out certain encouraging trends, we must not delude ourselves. Right across this country, there are thousands of families going through terrible times because of this pandemic. I just want to take a moment to express my deep condolences to those who are mourning. All Canadians share your sadness, and they stand with you during this terrible ordeal. Know that the government is there for you, and we will come through these difficult times together. We cannot see this news without thinking of the seniors in their residences that can't see their children, that can't see their grandchildren except on FaceTime, and who are afraid, who see the news and hear about what's happening in seniors' homes across the province and across the country. And they're worried as to whether they will ever see their children or grandchildren again. It's extremely hard, and we must do everything we can for them by working together, but also by making it clear that everyone has to continue to stay home. We have to continue to slow the spread of this virus, and together we will get through this.
And because it's Sunday, I want to end again by talking directly to all the kids who might be watching. This week is National Volunteer Week. That means we say thank you to everyone around us doing things like helping seniors get groceries or putting in a shift at a food bank. You can join in from home, too. Ask your parents if you can help them make dinner and do extra cleaning around the house. Help your brother or sister with schoolwork. Say hi over FaceTime to your grandparents who I know are missing you. Young and young at heart, we can all make a real difference. I heard a great story the other day about a restaurant in Nova Scotia, the Canteen. They've turned the restaurant into a community kitchen where people pitch in and get meals to those in need. And there have been thousands of Canadians who've already signed up through our national COVID-19 volunteer recruitment campaign to lighten the load on our frontline workers. Everyone can help out. everyone can help us get through this. À tous les enfants qui sont à la maison.
To all the children who are now at home, don't forget that we need you. Ask your parents if you can help them prepare a meal or help with the cleaning. Help your brother or your sister with their homework. Say hello on FaceTime to your grandparents who miss you. We are all able to do our best and make this a better place. And at this time, as we're facing a challenge like we've never seen before, we all have a chance to contribute. But I know that we will all continue to do our part. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va maintenant passer à la période de questions, en commençant par le téléphone. Modérateur, c'est à vous.
Merci. Thank you. First question, Michelle Carbert from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. My question is with regards to the government's decision to tighten the scrutiny of foreign takeovers of Canadian firms impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is this decision important, and why did you take this decision a month after European countries started doing this?
We recognize that countries around the world are looking at their own regimes and recognizing that there are vulnerable businesses that are going to be important to our recovery, who are perhaps exposed to foreign purchases in a vulnerable time, that we need to be careful we're taking care of. So we will be strengthening our oversight and paying close attention to foreign investment in this country to ensure that there isn't people taking advantage of this crisis.
We recognize that it's important in these times of economic slowdown and vulnerability for many businesses that there are not people or companies overseas that are trying to take advantage of this situation to buying and investing in Canadian companies which normally would not be vulnerable to that type of takeover. And that's why we are talking about just how important these measures are to ensure the protection of our industries and our economy.
And as a follow-up, are you aware of any foreign takeover deals that are coming or have occurred since the pandemic? And are there any sectors you're concerned about?
I think we've highlighted that certainly as we look at challenges around supply chains for essential medical supplies and personal protective equipment, as we strengthen our own domestic industry and production, we wouldn't want a foreign investor to be able to take that production that is being made for Canadians in this moment of crisis and send it overseas. We also recognize that there are perhaps some startups with brilliant ideas that are facing a cash crunch right now that we would very much want to remain Canadian for the coming years, who could be exposed to predatory foreign investors. This is something that we're, of course, going to be keeping an eye on.
Thank you. Prochaine question, modérateur.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. What can you tell us about the negotiations regarding the reconvening of Parliament next week? And if the 338 MPs have to be recalled tomorrow, whose fault will it be? Well, we are very concerned about the fact that we have not yet reached an agreement with all the opposition parties to not come back tomorrow morning. The current situation is that Parliament is supposed to resume tomorrow on the 20th of April with 338 MPs from every corner of the country and their teams, their staff, security guards and administrative personnel. And of course, we are not in a situation where that should be happening. We need a Parliament that works. We need to do that in a responsible way. And that's why we've had some good conversations with most of the parties, and we're close to an agreement to be able to come back every week to ensure that they can ask questions and we can move forward with legislation. But the Conservatives are resisting that reasonable solution at this time, but we do hope that this can be resolved soon. Follow-up?
Vous dites
Yes.
c'est les conservateurs.
So you're
Vous
saying that
vouliez
it's
parler aux
the
enfants tout à l'heure,
Conservatives.
dimanche. Quel
Now, you were
exemple ça
talking
donne,
to
ça,
children earlier
alors
because
que
it's
tout le monde
Sunday.
fait
So
des-
what kind of
des
image does this
sacrifices et
present
tout le monde,
if everyone is making
s'empêche de faire certaines
sacrifices?
choses qu'il a envie
And
de faire? Quel exemple ça donne que les politiciens
does it
fédéraux
really
arrivent pas à
show that
s'entendre à un moment comme celui-ci?
politicians are not able to agree at such a difficult time? Well, that's a very good question, Lena. And for me, it's very frustrating because we're clearly hearing from our experts and public health authorities that we must continue to make the responsible choices and limit our movements. And it seems to me that it's fairly clear that Parliament should not return in the same manner as before starting tomorrow. I very much believe that it's extremely important to continue to support our democracy and keep our institutions working. And I'm willing to answer questions. I take questions from the media every day, and I think opposition MPs should have the chance to ask questions as well. And that's why we made a proposal that seems very reasonable to all the other parties, but the Conservatives, I don't know. I think you'll have to ask them what their approach is and why they're being unreasonable in this situation.
We're in a situation right now where our public health authorities, our experts, and common sense tells us we need to continue to limit our movements. We need to continue to work from home. We need to continue to do everything we can to ensure that people are kept safe from further spread of this pandemic. That's why it would be irresponsible for the House of Commons to resume tomorrow as scheduled on April 20th with 338 MPs, their staff, support staff in the House of Commons, security, people coming in from across the country at this particular point. We have proposed, and it's been accepted by, largely accepted by the other opposition parties, that we should have accountability measures. We should have Parliament that functions, but we have to do it responsibly. And that's why coming back every week for questions and for work on passing new legislation is something that I think is reasonable and is acceptable to most parties. I believe deeply in our democracy, in our democratic institutions, and our principles, and it's important to be accountable. I'm perfectly happy to be taking questions every day from media, and I'm looking forward to taking questions from opposition parties. But it has to be done in a responsible way, and right now the Conservatives are not taking a responsible approach.
Thank you. Merci. Modérateur, prochaine question.
Merci, thank you. Next question, Libertium, Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Yes, Prime Minister, thanks for talking to us. The NDP is asking for, in terms of parliamentary sittings, 1 in-person day and 2 virtual sittings. You have proposed only 1 virtual sitting. Can you explain why 2 is unacceptable?
I think it is important that we have in-person sittings, and I think 1 a week seems about the right number in a reduced fashion. But we also have been clear from the very beginning that we think there should be virtual sittings to allow parliamentarians from across the country who aren't within driving distance of Ottawa to continue to participate. And that's why we have been pushing for virtual sittings. We have heard from the House of Commons administration that they are incapable of standing up virtual sittings for this coming week, but we are very open to increasing them over the subsequent weeks because it's important that we be able to hear from all parliamentarians.
Follow-up?
And as a follow-up, there's a report of a deal that has been reached. Can you confirm that a deal has been reached with the opposition parties?
I can't confirm anything like that. As I came out this morning, I heard that we were very close on it, but I haven't in the past half hour got notice that there is a deal. I think it seems very, very reasonable that we can agree that there needs to be a parliament that is functioning responsibly in this difficult time. Most parties have responsible proposals forward, and I certainly hope that the Conservatives will agree to doing the responsible thing here.
Merci. Modérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
La prochaine question, Raymond Filion, TVA. À vous la parole.
TVA.
Oui, bon dimanche, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Les séances virtuelles.
Now, the virtual Sunday sittings, what would they look like in concrete terms, Mr. Trudeau? Well, there are various proposals that the House of Commons is looking at now. The idea is for members of Parliament across the country to make speeches and ask questions via video conferencing with the same rights and ability to speak as people currently have inside the House of Commons. There would be some MPs in the House and other MPs attending virtually. But the technical and technological part of this is still being worked on, and that's why the House of Commons has asked for more time to get this ready. Now, in your speech, you said that thousands of families are going through a terrible time, and Premier Legault said yesterday that his government was not properly prepared for this pandemic. You've said in the past that there will be a time for a post-mortem, but after a month of this crisis, there are questions being asked across the country. Do you think that your government was adequately prepared for this pandemic? Well, I think that when we're in the middle of a crisis and we're seeing the kind of tragedies we're witnessing, we can never say that we were fully prepared. And we will certainly learn to be better prepared the next time, if there are other times, and of course we hope not. But at the same time, we know that Canadians and the different levels of government and organizations and everyone have come together to try and put in place measures to protect people and slow the spread of this virus in a positive way compared to other countries. But even if we end up having a better history than other countries, let's not forget that this is a terrible tragedy for too many families out there, and we all have a responsibility to do our very best to ensure that we come out of this tragedy and this crisis without too many additional tragedies. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada, could you tell me why 3 in-person sittings per week with reduced numbers is unreasonable? Well, I think we know that all parliamentarians cannot return to the House of Commons. There are people who live in provinces that are far away from Ottawa and cannot return. And that's why we've been saying it's very important to have virtual sittings so that people can participate in order to represent their community during this crisis. At the same time, being there to answer questions regularly is also important for our democracy and for Canadians. It's fine to take media questions here. I do that just about every day, but parliamentarians also have a role to play. And the proposal we made for a session or a sitting every week was accepted by most of the parties as being a reasonable compromise during this crisis.
I think it's extremely important that we remember that people are elected to Parliament in every corner of this country to be their community's voice in Parliament. And that's why, particularly in a time of crisis, it is important to look at virtual ways that allow members from every corner of the country to engage in parliamentary debate and discussion, and not just those who have the opportunity or the proximity to be around the National Capital Region. That's why we've been pushing the virtual sittings. We know that accountability is important, and taking questions every day from the media is a good thing, but it is also important that parliamentarians and opposition politicians get to ask questions of the government, which is why we've proposed that the Parliament sit every week in a reduced fashion, and that is a proposal that was accepted by most parties. The Conservatives still need to work on it a little bit in terms of their own reflection.
Est-ce que vous seriez ouvert quand les outils virtuels seront disponibles? Est-ce qu'il y a plusieurs
open to there being several virtual sittings per week once that technology is available, 3 or 4, for example, because right now the opposition parties cannot ask you to account every single day. And that's why they're unhappy. Would you be in favor of several virtual sittings? I can tell you that the proposals made by the opposition parties and the issues they are raising in terms of criticizing the government are, heard in the media, and we have adjusted our proposal and are trying to ensure that we're doing everything we can to respond to real needs across the country. We are always open to a functioning parliament. I think it's extremely important that be the case, but it has to be done reasonably, and that's why we're trying to find a solution. And I can tell you that most opposition parties do agree. Only the Conservatives may force us to come back tomorrow morning with 338 members of Parliament in the House of Commons.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. You've just said that you respect Parliament, that you believe in accountability. So why is your party still haggling at the last minute over terms of this sitting? Why is this so complicated?
We have been consistent from the very beginning, from a number of days ago, where I said we have a proposal to bring back Parliament every single week and ensure that we're expanding and looking at virtual sittings as quickly as we can. This has been our position, and we're consistently on that position. Most opposition parties found this to be reasonable. There is one party, and because the House is scheduled to resume tomorrow morning, there is required to be unanimous consent by the parties to not come back tomorrow morning, and the Conservatives are not wanting to be reasonable in this, I think.
Australia and other countries are calling for an international and an independent investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 outbreak in China. You've said this is not the time to point fingers or assign blame, but are you supportive of this investigation in the future? And do you still believe China responded and reported adequately?
I think it's extremely important that we understand exactly what happened and ask really tough questions of all countries involved, including China. This is something that we need to pursue. But my priority right now, and the priority for countries around the world, needs to be doing everything we can to keep our people safe and make sure that we have the resources necessary to protect our citizens and get through this, and that will always be my focus. We
recognize that there are important questions to be asked, and there needs to be reflection on what happened and what kind of responsibilities some countries have, including China. But our priority must be how we're going to protect our own citizens now and tomorrow, how we can ensure that we have everything we need to keep ourselves safe.
Ian Wood, CTV News. Prime Minister, a correctional facility near Montreal has confirmed dozens of COVID-19 cases, and the same is true with other facilities across the country, including one near Vancouver. What are you doing to protect the incarcerated population and the corrections staff in these facilities to stop the spread of COVID-19?
From the beginning, Corrections Canada has taken measures to protect both inmates and staff in these facilities, including eliminating visits, reducing transfers, looking at measures including staggered timetables to keep inmates and staff more separate from each other, ensuring that there are different mechanisms in place, and those reflections are ongoing. We're always looking for new ways to ensure protection of Canadians in those facilities.
And some provinces have had to cut elective procedures in hospitals to prepare and manage COVID-19 patients or prepare for them. Canada already has long wait lists for some procedures. Is the federal government going to assist provinces to make sure that these existing backlogs aren't amplified once we're through this?
We have a tremendous amount of confidence that provinces are going to be able to continue to manage their healthcare systems appropriately. We sent them $500 million in new resources to ensure that they are able to continue to deal with this crisis. One of the key elements through this crisis was ensuring that if more and more people got infected, there would still be emergency beds for them. There would still be intensive care units available to them to deal with the very real challenges of COVID-19 and prevent the death rates from skyrocketing as they have in other countries where their medical systems were overwhelmed. I think Canadians understand how important it is to make it through this crisis as quickly as possible so we can get back to normal. But getting through it as quickly as possible means being very careful about what we are doing doing right now to maximize our opportunity to help as many Canadians if they get infected.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. In Austria, for example, they have a plan to get businesses reopened, and they're doing it in a 2-week process. They open a business, a small business, monitor for 2 weeks. If the cases don't go up, they continue then with hotels, restaurants, etc. Provinces here in Canada, there are some that are have plans that they're announcing on how they're going to do that. I'm wondering what the coordination is between your government and the provinces. Will the federal government put a plan up as well? And what are you saying in terms of which businesses should be able to reopen first and when?
Many of the decisions around what makes sense in terms of a careful restarting of the economy are much more appropriately made at the provincial level, given both provincial authorities and the reality that the shape of this pandemic is very, very different in different parts of the country. What we are working on coordinating with the provinces is a set of principles and approaches that can be applied at different moments and in different ways across the country. We want to be there to ensure that there is testing capacity, that we are supporting on contact tracing, that we are remaining consistent in the messages that Canadians are hearing from the different orders of government across the country about how to be very, very careful to not allow for a resurgence of COVID-19 just as restrictions start being eased. These conversations are very much live with the provinces right now. We are listening very carefully to what experts and looking very carefully at what is working and has worked in other jurisdictions and seeing how and if that can be adapted to us. We've recognized from the beginning that we have been slightly slower. We were able to hold off the pace of the virus in Canada for a few more weeks than many other places, and therefore we can take advantage of learning what works in different situations to adapt it to Canada. We are being extremely thoughtful about that easing, and again, people need to know it's not going to suddenly reopen in any part of the country overnight to what it was before. We're going to have to be very, very careful, very gradual, very progressive if we are to prevent the kind of resurgence that would send us all back into lockdown as we were before. We want to make sure that what we are doing now is not for nothing, that we manage to get through this with the kind of containment and control approaches that the proper measures will allow for. Okay. Nous savons que les gens
We know that people want to know when this is going to end and when we can relax certain restrictions. But we have a responsibility to be very careful, to do things properly and gradually, and to remain extremely vigilant. Of course, we're taking inspiration from what is being done elsewhere in the world and their success, and possibly their challenges as well. At different times in different parts of the country, there will be choices being made, and not necessarily the same choices, but as the federal government, we are trying to coordinate our efforts so that the underlying principles with respect to that gradual recovery will be applied the same way across the country.
COVID-19 at a northern Alberta oil sands camp has sickened at least 12 people around Alberta, and reports of other cases in other parts of the country from that. Should measures be in place to ensure that returning workers isolate whether or not they have symptoms?
I think that's a decision for the government of Alberta, but certainly we all understand how important it is to keep workers in essential businesses, workers who continue to work, as safe as possible. Safety of workers, of their families as well, needs to be the primary consideration of any government, and I certainly expect that to be the case in this one as well.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
The Prime Minister of Canada with his daily briefing, daily update on